today's Junkyard Wandering, we're going to take a look at this sweet 1988 Toyota Camry Wagon. Let's do it. I remember seeing these things on the road, but I don't know if I know anybody who actually had one. There were two engine options available. This one has got the 2-liter 4-cylinder. That was a 16-valve engine, which, believe it or not, was kind of a big deal in '88 to have 4 valves per cylinder. They did also make a 2.5-liter V6 that was an option, and that was probably the same V6 that powered the short-lived Lexus ES250. Not a lot of folks remember that one, but it preceded the ES300 and was only in production for a couple of years, and I think it came out shortly after or around the same time as the LS400 was launched. So just really Toyota to share engines like that. I'm pretty sure this one is also an automatic. Yeah, we got an automatic. They did offer this with a manual. Allegedly, you could get it with a manual in the 4-cylinder, and even, allegedly, a manual with the V6, but I don't know if I've ever seen one. So let's take a look at the miles. 180,000. That just seems surprising. Oh, this thing is kind of gross inside. I love the style of the seats, the ribbing. Wow, this driver's seat is in great shape. Oh yes, motorized seat belts. So, remember when tons of cars had motorized seat belts? My knowledge on the topic is somewhat limited, but it's my understanding that the NHTSA required some sort of passive safety device in vehicles by a certain year. And a lot of companies decided to go the route of the airbag. Other companies decided to go the route of the passive seatbelt, which required that it be on this motorized track, so it would go up and out of your way when you got out of the car. Obviously, that's not the case on this one because the batteries have been removed from all the cars in the junkyard. But basically, you would open the door, the seatbelt would move out of the way, you'd get in, you'd close the door, and then the seatbelt would go back, and that would be diagonally across you, as you see here. And there would still be a lap belt. Oh, here it is. It's kind of dirty and doesn't look like it wants to come out, but you'd have to manually hook the lap belt in there. So I had a Nissan 240SX that had this. Ultimately, the NHTSA changed their course on that, and by a certain year they required airbags, front airbags, to be in all vehicles. So the motorized seatbelt thing sort of quickly went the way of the dinosaur. So if you see a car with a motorized seatbelt, it's usually from a very narrow window of years. I would say late 80s, early 90s. I couldn't give you an exact number, but it's kind of a nostalgia thing, but they're kind of annoying when they make a lot of noise and don't really work right. So, pretty standard fare. I see we got auto. You said I got auto down in 1988? Is that really what that means? Wow. Check that out. There's this down and up. Wait. I promise I know how windows work. Okay, those go down and up. This one goes down. Huh. Maybe this switch is up and this is down. And this is auto down. Yes. I mean, I'm not stupid, right? You would think that you would push this switch the same as you push the other one. I guess that's what they want you to do. They want you to push auto down, but there's no auto up, so the switch doesn't move. But if you want to manually up and manually down, well, not manually, but electrically, but without auto, you would use this little lever. It's like a little flight joystick. That's weird. But hey, if it worked. Some of the stuff from this era, you find like cockpit-like controls. So you had like this curved thing. I think that the Celicas were like this. Later the S2000 would do this. You have all these switches that are up here, and they're sort of like going for this cockpit design. And then you have all these switches. Of course, down here is pretty standard. You've got your climate control, excuse me, your HVAC controls. I don't think there's anything automatic here. This still has a Toyota stereo. What? Somebody should pull that. Cup holders, those look flimsy. Do they work? Yes. Huh. Ooh, I see a little cable down here. Somebody had a... That's not aux input. Who knows what that is? Anyways, like I said, pretty standard fare. I get these narrow vents up here above the stereo, and look at this little hidden clock. I don't know if you can see that. There's a... I know it's in the shadow. There's a clock up there, and there's vents right there. What are those vents above the regular vents? Who knows? The dash has, woo, really seen better days. It's all discolored and warped. Can't remember the last time I saw a driver's seat in better shape than a passenger seat. Let's see what we got here. Lift for emergency exit. I bet you... I'm not a bright red lever scientist, but I bet you that has something to do with the motorized seatbelts. I bet you that lever is designed to allow you to get... Oh, but you know what? There's only one. And then this has push down belt release lever. I don't know. Maybe that's not a button. It doesn't look like a button. It looks like maybe it's a light. And there's their transmission right here. ECT, normal, power. Typically that's electronically controlled transmission. And it looks like the pressed in is for power and not pressed in is for normal. So usually what that does is that holds your shifts a little bit longer, closer to red line, something like that. Cool. And then, oh, those of you familiar with some of my Volvo videos may have seen this. It's kind of hard to see, but this is an overdrive button. So a lot of cars from this era allowed you to disable or enable overdrive with a button. Now this is a Toyota, so I'm guessing that is a button to disengage overdrive and that it is used by default, but I could be wrong. Back seat looks so-so. Most back seats are in good shape unless they've been mistreated. Oh, roof rack. Factory roof rack. Now that's bolted to the roof like my Volvo 240 wagon. But the mounting location makes me think it's bolted to something a little more securely than the Volvo. We got some vines growing out of this thing. Dead vines. I don't know if any Camry wagon experts out there know much about this, but I bet you these taillights are somewhat hard to come by. I don't know if they're valuable per se, they just probably not a lot of them out there, because I mean, who's collecting them? Who's keeping one of these on the road? I mean, somebody for sure, but they were already made in low enough numbers. And then a lot of them just, you know, they die or people junk them or they wreck them or whatever. But yeah. Ah. Cool. That was a lot vehicle towing a hood with an engine on the hood, like a child on a sled. Awesome. This does appear to have matching original wheels. They're steel, but they've got neat little center caps. Certainly a curious time in automotive history, right? 1988, what was going on? So this was the dominance of the American minivan was already in full swing. So when this car came out, caravans had become really popular a few years earlier. Other American companies were making minivans. And Honda didn't have a wagon rival yet. The Accord wagon didn't come out until the early 90s. Again, this is a 1988. So this car would have had some domestic competition. Chevy Celebrity, I think there was a Buick, maybe Century wagon, thinking front-wheel drive, mid-size wagons. The full-size wagons, they still existed, right? Like family vacation style, wood panels, Ford LTD, Country Squire, all that. They still existed, but they, ever since, fuel became no longer a thing to be taken for granted at affordable prices, fuel economy was a very important item on the list. And so a car like this would have been really desirable to somebody who wanted a wagon shape but wanted good 4-cylinder fuel economy. And of course there would have been the Volvo 240s and 740s. Those would have been a little bit more upmarket. I haven't looked at prices or anything, but I feel like this is more of an economy, practical consumer type vehicle. But the other car it may have competed with would have been the Ford Taurus wagon. Remember, when the Taurus came out, a lot of people forget this because they started to look like catfish in the 90s. But the Ford Taurus had this really futuristic looking styling that a lot of people were enthusiastic about. And they sold those things in droves. And they also sold a wagon version. And I don't know if I've ever seen a first-gen Taurus wagon, but I'm pretty sure that's just because they've all, just disappeared. They haven't been kept on the road and things like that. And similar with these, but and that tiny little air filter, or tiny little oil filter. But this car would have had some competition, but it's a crowded market for a shrinking segment, and that's what this car was. And you fast forward, and what happened to the minivan? Well, the minivan got replaced by the SUV. The SUV became the car of choice for Americans everywhere, even people who weren't even considering a large vehicle like that. And I'm filming this in 2023, so where are we now? Well, SUVs are still common. Most SUVs that people consider are based on unibody car platforms and no longer truck platforms. But now the crossover has become really popular. So it's cool to me that this car, even though it's a wagon, this is, in a lot of ways, this is the roots of, like, what is it now? The Toyota Venza and all kinds of crossovers that exist. I'm not going to give you a list, but the crossover is one of the most popular selling vehicles in America today. And this is during a time when the wagon was really the closest option to a crossover. So, kind of a neat find. I know there's another car here that I'd like to look at it that is also an 80s Camry, and I want to go take a look at that one. I think it's a sedan, but it might have a minor difference compared to this one. So we can go take a look at that. But I'm a fan of wagons. I grew up in a family that had a wagon for many years. Most of my childhood we had a wagon, and my dad was super enthused when he found out I got my first Volvo wagon. So this is exactly the kind of car that I could have seen myself driving, if my car choices had gone a slightly different direction, or if one had popped up for sale in our neighborhood. Totally could have been my college car. Could have hauled a lot of stuff. So, pretty sweet. Let's keep moving. I'm going to take a look at that other Camry and see what we find. Here we go. Here's another old Camry. Hopefully this one will be able to demonstrate what I was discussing earlier with regards to transmission options. This is a sedan. We got the same 2.0 liter 4-cylinder. And ta-da! Manual transmission. Let's take a look. It's too bad the shift boot is gone. I think these had like a cool accordion style, classic 80s shift boot. The usual layout of things. Let's check out the mileage. 259,000 miles, not bad. Now, this combined with the other car would have been my preferred spec, obviously, manual transmission and a wagon. It did exist. I've never seen one, but it did exist. So there you go. Proof that they made Camry old school wagons. I think you could get the manual with the V6 too. That would be real sweet. Junkyards are the best. All right. Well, that's all we got for today's episode of Junkyard Wanderings. Thanks so much for watching.